Europe. He learned it in Europe. So what happens is the sunrise goes through one of these small holes in the tower and emerges as an image on the wall. And so if you take, so what would happen is if you take where the sun rises from solstice to solstice, the sun would move across, and the equinox, which we just passed, would be in the middle. The sun would be in the middle, and you would just see the sun moving across the wall. If that makes sense, without sort of any kind of description. Go on, just look up Jim Egan and his sites. He has great graphics and videos
and wonderful
about how this works.
Videos, very detailed.
So what you can see then, so you can use it as a calendar too. So the sun would appear at the one solstice on one side, move across the wall into the other solstice. So you could map out the year on where the sun is projected onto the wall. But the next curious thing about this tower is that at the equinox, where the sun would reflect onto the wall in the equinox, there is a fireplace, and it's up the wall.
It's like it would be like on this.
It'd be like
the second story, right?
It's on this. What would be the second story of it?
Ground level.
But it would be as if most fireplaces are on the ground floor, but it would be like as if a fireplace is in the middle of your wall somewhere halfway up, and it's it's got a curved top and a flat bottom, and the sun on the equinox appears inside that fireplace. But the curious thing, and the other curious thing about the fireplace is that there's two flues, one on either side, which no one can make any sense of. But one of the things that it does is that not only is the sun projected onto the wall, but because it's a sunrise on the ocean, it would be flipped over. Oh, there you go. So on the left side there, that's that shows the fireplace I'm talking about.
Yeah, so that arched niche.
Right.
Is the fireplace.
So what would happen on the equinox is that not only would you see the sun, but because it's an inversion, you would get the ocean on top of it.
Oh, wow.
So it's sort of, and I can't speak for exactly what that means, but it's got to be an alchemical alignment. You've got the water over the sun.
Right.
At the equinox in this niche. So
like fire water.
Yeah. So
in the I Ching, that would not be good, by the way.
What's that?
In the I Ching, that would not be good.
No. I forget which hexagram that is. I Ching was my first teacher.
Yeah.
Back when I was in college.
But it does feel very alchemical.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
because at that point, right, the ocean is lunar because of the relationship with the tides. And then the sun is the masculine. Right. So we have this the blending between the sun and the moon, and the masculine, the feminine, and water and fire, and so there's this synthesis going on that they're getting high off of on some level.
Right. Yeah. There's something that they were doing here, and the thing is that this is as sophisticated as anything I've come across. Mm-hmm. As far as alignment, Stonehenge, and all the rest of them, this is as sophisticated.
Interesting.
The other thing, it was 28 feet and it was built out. The thing is, there's something like 450 tons of granite under each of those pillars, not under each of them, maybe under all of them together.
Really?
So built to hold something really, really heavy.
That's pretty significant. I mean, that's like, that's some foreplanning and foresight, and also
engineering
and thinking that this thing's going to be around. I mean, they wanted this thing to be around and survive, because you don't have that kind of foundation without thinking we wanted to be able to sustain whatever's going to happen.
Right. And it was, and actually it lasted to its original height until the British stored munitions in it during the Revolutionary War. And whether they blew it up when they left or something, I'm not sure, but they stored munitions in the top. And Jim Egan thinks that this was all covered, that those arches those were all structural, that it was actually fully covered around.
That makes sense. It's amazing that they didn't damage the infrastructure when it blew the roof off.
Well, I guess that speaks to the level of the engineering. What is this?
Right.
It looks it's
17th century. Is that when this is happening? 17th century, roughly.
What's that? When this was built? All right.
Yeah.
So that begs the question, right? So, oops, I'm shouting. I'm sorry. I'm getting excited. Passion.
Yes.
My moon in Leo. Anyway. So the question. So what Jim Egan had to do is find out. All right. Well, so if Dee did design this, how did that come about? Well, it turns out. Now where did my notes go? And I can't because my name. That Dee was granted. That actually. Where's his name? I'm sorry, I have to check out notes because I'm holding a lot of names in my head. But Humphrey Gilbert, who's the half brother of Sir Walter Raleigh, who also tried around this time to get England into North America, but he failed. He had the famous failing Virginia colony, the Gone to Croatan thing, and all that disappeared. But Elizabeth grants Humphrey Gilbert basically the rights to all of North America in 1578.
Wow.
And which is, if you were Queen Elizabeth, oh yes, we grant you rights to all of North America. And so he calls on Dee. Now, Dee was brilliant cartographer, brilliant navigator on top of all of the other things that he was good at. And he had the best maps. He hung out with Mercator, who was the first person to make a globe in Europe. And he had the maps of Verrazano, who in 1525 sailed, went to New York Harbor and up off Long Island and up the coast. And he found, he described this bay, he called it Refugio, which, not surprisingly, in Italian means refuge. Mm-hmm. This is Chengi's cat, by the way.
Did you see his tail?
Who's decided to join the proceedings with us today.
The cats are into it today.
Yeah. So Dee had the maps.
Wandered into my world right here.
Oh, there's
who's that?
Cheng.
Chengi needs a girlfriend.
Yes. He doesn't want Rosie. She's high maintenance.
High maintenance, Cheng. Yeah. Sorry, Chengi's mellow.
So was he able to figure out who built this thing and when?
Well, this is what he comes up with. So Gilbert gets the rights to North America, anything above Florida, because the Spanish had Florida pretty well by then, and in fact they were vicious. The French tried to establish a colony in North Florida, and the Spanish actually just went and killed every man, woman, and child of the colony.
That'll send a message.
Yeah. So the French said, we'll go up north somewhere. So Humphrey Gilbert, for all of Dee's assistance, says, well, you can have anything basically north of the 50th parallel or something like that, which ends up being Canada and Alaska. Mm-hmm. And Dee, of course, was very interested in finding the Northwest Passage. Mm-hmm. Across at this time also, because no one had any clue as to the size of North America at the time. So they try to he makes this trip over in 1578, doesn't quite work out. The ships get halfway across, they get blown back. In 1582, and in order to hold the continent, they had to build a fort and have it be established for a year. I don't know whose rules those were or why, but those were the rules, according to Elizabeth, in order for you to be granted all that land. So Dee, of course, has a vested interest in this because he gets all of Canada and Newfoundland and et cetera. I think you need to take a walk. And but what happens is in 1582, there's sort of a secret trip over to check out what's called what is now Narragansett Bay and Newport, because there's a huge harbor. Dee said this is perfect. You can fit a whole navy inside this harbor. It's spectacular, according to the maps of Verrazano. So, but what happens is there's this sort of a kind of a secret expedition that no one writes about except the Spanish spies telling back to the King of Spain, because they're obviously very interested in what the English were doing vis-a-vis North America. And the Spanish spies said that these ships went out in 1582. They were gone for 9 months, and then they come back. Then the actual expedition of Humphrey Gilbert and that other expedition, the one that likely built the tower, was under Anthony Brigham. So Humphrey Gilbert so after they come back, Humphrey Gilbert has this big expedition, all these ships, they're all going to go and establish a colony at Newport.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is everything goes wrong. They get lost in the fog. Their supply ship sinks. They get lost. They end up, and then the last ship left gets dumped by a wave outside the Azores, and it's like all gone. So so it must have been this preliminary group that went and built this tower the year before.
So this is like the late 1580s or early 1580s?
So this is 1582, the tower was built. 1583 was this failed expedition, because no one shows up for another 50 years.
It's an amazing piece of work for 1582. I mean, look at that thing.
Oh, it's astonishing.
Yeah.
It's astonishing. Because
nobody really knows about it.
Yeah, and no one knows, and so this guy, Jim Egan, has really uncovered, the best scenario. Yeah, because the map, and the thing is, one of the things that made him realize it was because the maps of that time, the ones that Gilbert had, Narragansett Bay was called D River, and Newport was called D Port. So D actually named these things after himself.
Is that where we get the word design from?
Design, maybe so, or delight. So anyway, so this tower is an astonishing piece of engineering, astonishing piece of celestial alignments, and no one really knows much about it. And it seems like and because his Monas hieroglyphica, that symbol that we talked about, can be mapped onto this structure. You can do all sorts of other interesting things. It seems like he was trying to, and it also maps onto like the Irish Round Tower kind of thing,
which is another wonderful.
Which we would call lithopuncture, which is kind of acupuncture for the Earth.
Right.
So they were really doing, a sort of lithopuncture of sort of a sacred tower, building, church. To be placed in North America, to be the focal point of the sacred for North America. So that seems to be the most likely possibility of what this was about. Mm-hmm. It's there. The alignments are real. The whole thing seems to be working right, and it still works. But after this expedition fails, and they're not able to. There's a sacred geometry of it. That's great. So
is this how the Monas hieroglyphica is expressed in the tower?
Yeah, and the numbers.
Oh, that's great. I was going to ask that question. So this is wonderful.
So but what happens though? So the expedition fails. They're not able to build the city of Newport, and it's at this point that Dee and Kelly actually meet. It's 1583. This kind of very full year, and at that point, I guess he just gives up, goes off to Europe with Kelly, and those other adventures that we talked about last time begin.
So you can see down here in the bottom right, you can see the elements. There's Terra, right? Aquae, Aries. Yeah, and then what do we have over here? There's going to be
hard to read.
Well, it's got to be
air, right? Fire. Okay.
Ignis, so maybe Ignis.
Okay, so we have the elements down here. We have the horizon tempor. This looks like a Pisces vesica thing we have going from top to bottom. And
except it would be overlapped if it were a Pisces.
It would, yeah. So maybe
it's really a double circle, but Yeah, but he also shows, because Jim Egan also shows in his books, how